The wind found her first, cutting, cool, dragging the last warmth from a girl who had already lost too much. Ivy Hart staggered through the frozen dirt road like a shadow trying to outrun its own fear. Boots slipping, breath shaking, eyes fixed on nothing but the darkness ahead. Behind her, the echo of hooves kept closing in, slow, certain, like something that believed she would fall before sunrise, and for a moment, it looked like she might. Her knees buckled, her fingers scraped the ground. Hope thinned to a thread, until a quiet rancher stepped out of the storm, not with a gun drawn, but with a choice she never expected anyone to give her. Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. Stay with this story until the end. And don't forget to subscribe for more Western love. Ivy Hart hadn't meant to tremble when the cabin door closed behind her, but her body reacted before her mind could reason with it. The sound of wood settling in the cold made her flinch as if expecting a command, a slap, or the creak of a lock sliding into place. For 18 years, doors had always meant something was being taken from her. Freedom, safety, the right to breathe wrong without consequence. But the man standing a few steps away wasn't reaching for a key. He was reaching for distance. Caleb Vance stopped with enough space between them to let a frightened colt bolt through. One hand rested at his belt, not on his gun, not on the door, just there, steady, giving the room time to breathe. "You're safe here, Miss Hart," he said, voice low and even, like he was talking to a skittish mare he didn't want to spook. "No one's going to make demands of you tonight. Or any night." Ivy nodded, though her throat tightened at the word safe. She'd learned long ago that safety was a thing promised often and kept rarely. Caleb motioned to the small hallway. "Your room's down there. Door closes clean, locks from the inside." He held something out to her. Small, cool, metal. A key. "This one's yours. No one else has a copy." Her breath hitched. A door that locked from her side. No shouting for permission, no scratching at wood, no rules taped behind a latch. She touched the key as though it were breakable. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Caleb replied. "You just need to rest." He didn't smile. He wasn't the kind of man who gave out easy grins. But there was a gentleness in the set of his shoulders, the same kind a man used when trying not to scare an injured animal. It made her chest ache in a way she didn't have words for. Footsteps thudded on the porch, followed by a knock that was far too cheerful for the hour. Jonah Pike poked his head in, a wiry young ranch hand with wind-burned cheeks and eyes that always looked like they'd just caught a joke. "Boss, you need anything? Stove's running. Hot." "Oh, ma'am." His grin softened as soon as he saw Ivy. Not pity, just kindness. "If you're hungry, I can fry up something simple." Ivy almost apologized. For what, she didn't know. Existing, maybe. Taking space, being a burden. But before she could speak, Caleb cut in quietly. "You don't have to earn a meal here." It stunned her enough to keep her mouth shut. Ruth had always said food was for those who worked. Silas said only useful people deserved warmth, and both had taught her the price of breathing someone else's air. Caleb must have recognized the flicker of confusion in her eyes, because he added, "You're not in their house anymore." Jonah tipped his hat. "Holler if you need anything, Miss Hart. Mabel Sutter's sending over blankets in the morning. Says every bride deserves softness." He winked, then vanished back into the cold night. Bride, The word made Ivy swallow hard. She wasn't a bride in her heart, not yet. Maybe not ever. She barely understood what she had agreed to when she stepped off that wagon with nothing but her mother's ribbon and a desperate prayer. Caleb gestured toward the hallway again. Go on. The bed's clean. Window opens if you need air. No one will come in unless you invite them. No one. Not a man. Not a voice shouting orders. Not a hand grabbing her arm because she breathed too loud. Her feet carried her toward the hall, but halfway there she stopped. The tremor in her hands returned, and the key bit lightly into her palm. Caleb, she whispered. He lifted his head. Yes, ma'am? Why give me a key? Most folks wouldn't. Most folks, he said, ain't trying to undo the harm others did. Then, softer. And a woman deserves a door she controls. The words hit her so deep she couldn't breathe around them. In her room, she shut the door gently, tried the lock, unlocked it, locked it again. The click was soft, but it echoed all through her bones. The sound of a life she didn't know she was allowed to imagine. She pressed her forehead to the wood and let out a breath she'd been holding since childhood. Maybe she could sleep without fear tonight. Maybe she could believe him. Maybe the key in her hand wasn't just metal. Maybe it was the first thing in her life that truly belonged to her. The next morning came pale and cold. The kind of morning that made the world feel too big for someone who had spent most of her life trying to take up as little space as possible. Ivy barely touched the breakfast Jonah left on the table, though the smell of hot bread and eggs made her stomach twist with a need she didn't want to show. Caleb watched her from the wood stove, arms folded loosely, not judging, not hurrying her, just noticing. We'll head into town, he said finally. Only if you're up for it. Supplies won't wait, but you can. Ivy startled. She'd forgotten she had a choice in anything. I can go, she whispered. Caleb nodded once and reached for his coat. He didn't offer to help her with hers, didn't step too close, didn't move in the way Silas always had. Hovering, crowding, warning. Caleb simply held the door open and let the cold morning settle between them like a respectful chaperone. The town of Amber Ridge looked small from afar, but up close it had the sharpness of a place that judged quickly and remembered slowly. Boots thudded against porches. Women gathered at storefronts. Men paused with sacks of grain mid-lift, their eyes trailing Ivy as she walked beside Caleb. Whispers started before she even reached Main Street. That the mail-order girl? Heard she came with nothing but trouble. Pretty face, though. Shame it'll fade. Ivy felt heat climb up her neck. She kept her gaze on the dirt road, the way Ruth had taught her. Don't give folks a reason to look longer, girl. But out of the corner of her eye, she saw Caleb's jaw tighten. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pick a fight. He simply turned his head, met the staring men with a look as steady as a hammer dropping on a nail, and said, "If you've got something to say about my wife, say it where I can hear it." The street went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with wind. Wife. The word hit Ivy like a stone in her chest. Heavy, undeserved, terrifying, and strangely protective all at once. She swallowed and kept walking, her hands fisted in her coat. Caleb didn't touch her, didn't step closer, but she could feel the warmth of him at her side. A silent offer of shelter she didn't yet know how to take. Outside the general store, a broad-shouldered woman with silver-streaked hair bustled out, carrying 2 folded quilts. Her face was bright, her voice brighter. "You must be Ivy Hart, she declared before Ivy had a chance to breathe. I'm Mabel Sutter, pastor's wife, town's second conscience. First one's the good Lord, but he's slower than me. Jonah, stacking crates nearby, snorted. Mabel swatted the air. Hush, boy. Then she turned to Ivy with a softness that nearly undid the girl. These are for you, sweetheart. I sew one for every new bride. World's hard enough. Bed shouldn't be. Ivy blinked. For me? Unless there's another Ivy in town. Mabel winked. Doubtful. The last one married a blacksmith and moved north with more children than sense. A few women along the walkway gave Ivy looks, some curious, some cold, others unreadable. But Mabel stepped between Ivy and every gaze, chatting loudly enough to drown out whispers. She placed one quilt in Ivy's arms, tucking the corner like a mother would. There, Mabel said. Something soft to remind you you're not alone. Ivy didn't know what to do with kindness shaped like a quilt. She held it awkwardly, like a treasure she wasn't sure belonged to her. Caleb cleared his throat. Thank you, Mabel. You don't owe me thanks, she said. Just treat her right, and teach those roomers to mind their manners. Mabel marched off before anyone could argue. Ivy exhaled slowly. She's very direct. Caleb let out something almost like a laugh. That's one word for her. Why would she help me? Ivy asked, her voice barely a whisper. Caleb didn't answer right away. He reached for a sack of grain, hefting it with one arm, speaking only after a long moment. Because folks with soft hearts know how to spot someone who's had theirs bruised, and because this town ain't perfect, but some of us are trying. Ivy held the quilt tighter. The morning didn't feel as cold anymore. As they left the storefront, she noticed something. Just a small thing, easy to miss. Caleb walked half a step behind her, not in front. Not leading, not pulling, just making sure she wasn't forced to face the world alone. It wasn't love. It wasn't safety, not fully. But it was a place to stand. And for the first time in her life, Ivy Hart felt like she wasn't standing on that ground by herself. The day had stretched long, and Ivy's arms ached from carrying sacks of flour and jars of preserves. She had insisted on helping. Choose something small, she'd told herself. Something that proves you belong somewhere. Caleb hadn't argued, only watched her closely. As if every time she lifted more than she should, he weighed stepping in. By sundown, the cabin glowed warm against the quieting land. Ivy slipped inside ahead of the men, wanting a moment alone, a moment without eyes on her. She breathed in the scent of pine smoke and the quilts Mabel had brought, letting herself imagine, for the length of a single heartbeat, that this place might someday feel like home. But the illusion cracked when she heard voices outside. Caleb's first, low, level. Then a woman's, steady and clipped. Sheriff Ada Quinn. Ivy didn't mean to listen. She only meant to set down the kettle. But the words drifted in through the half-open window, sharp enough to freeze her in place. Crowley filed the injunction again, Ada said. If you can't prove joint ownership within the month, he'll claim water rights straight out from under you. Caleb exhaled, quiet, heavy, resigned. I know. And your marriage? Ada paused. Ivy felt her pulse jump. You think a judge will see it as legitimate? Or as desperation? Caleb didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. It was desperation. Something inside Ivy folded. Ada clicked her tongue. You're a good man, Caleb, but good men make stupid choices under pressure. Does she know why you needed a wife? No. Ivy's grip tightened on the windowsill. No, Caleb repeated. And I don't intend to use her fear to win a fight over land. If she chooses to stay, it needs to be because she wants to, not because I need her on a document. Unfortunately, Ada replied, wanting isn't part of the law. Paper is. A silence settled. Long, waited. Ivy felt her chest squeeze until she couldn't draw breath. She backed away from the window like it had burned her. A wife on paper, a name on a deed, a person to tip the scales in a courtroom. Not a partner, not a choice, just a solution. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the sting behind her eyes. Ruth had said all her life that Ivy wasn't good for anything but chores and debt. Silas had said she'd be lucky if someone wanted to claim her at all. And here she was, claimed again, differently, gently, but for a purpose just the same. The door opened, letting in a wash of cool air. Ivy straightened too fast, nearly tripping over a stool. Caleb stepped inside, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper than usual. When he saw her, something softened in his expression. Concern first, then care. Ivy, you all right? She swallowed. I heard. He didn't pretend not to understand. That was one thing about Caleb Vance. He never pretended. You heard about the ranch? He said quietly. And the marriage. Ivy forced the words out, though her voice shook. You needed a name beside yours. That's why you wrote for a bride. Caleb's jaw worked once. He didn't deny it, not with lies, not with comfort. Yes, he said. I needed help. But I also meant what I told you. No one here is going to hurt you or use you. It feels like I already have been, Ivy whispered. Caleb stepped closer, but slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. I won't ask you to forgive the truth, but I won't lie to make it easier. You deserved a choice, and I should have given you all of it, not half. Ivy wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the weight of the key in her pocket. So what am I, Caleb? A wife? A witness? A line on a paper? His answer came without hesitation. You're a woman who's been hurt too damn much, and I'm trying not to add to it. Her throat tightened. She didn't know whether the honesty healed her or cut deeper. Caleb lowered his voice. If you want to leave once you're steady, I'll help you get anywhere you want to go. But while you're here, your choices are your own. Not mine. Not Crowley's. Not anyone's from your past. Ivy blinked hard against the heat in her eyes. She had never been offered a choice without a threat attached. Never been told she didn't have to earn her right to stay. But the knife of humiliation still twisted, needed, not wanted. She turned away before he could read every thought on her face. I just need a moment. Caleb nodded once. The same quiet understanding as always. Take all the moments you need. And Ivy, with the weight of a borrowed life pressing on her ribs, slipped into the small room that was hers. Hers to lock, hers to hold, hers to leave if she dared. And wondered what it meant to be wanted for real, and not just written into someone else's survival. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Ivy lay awake long after Caleb's footsteps faded and the cabin went still, staring at the faint outline of the key on her bedside table. It gleamed when the moonlight caught it, small, plain, nothing special. Yet it felt heavier than a wedding band, heavier than her own breath. A key meant safety. A key also meant responsibility. She wasn't sure which frightened her more. By morning, she had rehearsed what she needed to say a dozen times in her head. None of the words felt steady. They wobbled like a newborn foal trying to stand, but she clung to them anyway, because if she didn't speak now, she feared she never would. Caleb was already outside by the time she stepped onto the porch, coat dusted with frost, hands working at a stubborn fence rail. He glanced up when he heard her, but didn't straighten fully, as if giving her the choice to come closer or not. "I need to talk to you," Ivy said, her voice smaller than she wanted. Caleb rested his tools aside. "All right. Not, what about? Not, can it wait? Just, all right." It gave her the courage to continue. "I heard everything you and the sheriff said," Ivy began, gripping her sleeves. "About the ranch and the marriage." His jaw tightened, but his eyes didn't turn away. "I figured you did." "I'm not angry you needed help," she said quickly. "I'm angry I didn't know. I've lived my whole life being told things last, or not at all." Her breath fogged in front of her. "I can't go back to that, not even here." Caleb rubbed a hand over his face, thoughtful. "You're right. I should have told you. I don't want to be kept safe by being kept in the dark," Ivy whispered. That landed somewhere deep in him. She saw it in the way his shoulders dropped, in the slow breath he pulled in like a man rethinking every step he'd taken. "What do you need?" Caleb asked. The question startled her. No one had ever asked her that. Not Ruth. Not Silas. Not any soul who thought they owned even a sliver of her life. "I need," she swallowed. "I need choices, and I need for you not to make decisions for me without telling me why." Caleb nodded once, solemn. "Done." "And the room," she added, voice quivering. "If I want the door locked, it stays locked. If I want it open, it stays open. You ask first. Always." "Always," he echoed. "And if I choose to help around the ranch," she continued, finding strength in the words, "it's because I choose to, not because I owe you for a roof." A flicker of something, respect, maybe even pride, crossed Caleb's face. "You don't owe me anything except honesty, and you've given me more of that today than I gave you." Ivy didn't know how to respond. Honesty had always been punished before, yet here it was, rewarded. Caleb took a slow step backward, not forward. A gesture so subtle she almost missed it. But the message rang, clear. Your space stays yours. "If you ever want to leave this ranch," he said quietly, "you tell me. I'll see you safely wherever you choose. I won't hold you here with paper or promises you didn't freely make." Her throat tightened. "You'd help me leave, even if it meant losing the ranch?" He hesitated, but not long. "Yes." Ivy had no words for that. Mercy like that felt dangerous, unfamiliar, holy. Jonah wandered up from the barn at that moment, wiping his hands on a rag, oblivious to the weight of the air between them. "Miss Hart, you want to help mend tack today? If not, that's fine. I just figured you might be bored listening to the boss brood." Caleb shot him a look. Jonah grinned wider. And Ivy, against her own will, laughed. Just once. Just enough to surprise herself. "I'll help," she said, before fear could snatch the words back. Just a little. Caleb's eyes softened. Not possessive, not grateful in a way that made her feel indebted. Just quietly glad. "That's your choice," he said. Ivy held his gaze for a long moment. For the first time since she arrived, the ground beneath her didn't feel borrowed. It felt chosen. Amber Ridge looked friendlier under morning sun. But Ivy soon learned light didn't soften a town. It only revealed the shadows more clearly. She was carrying a bundle of leather straps Jonah had asked her to drop at the tack shop when she felt it. Eyes. Not the idle curiosity from the day before. Something colder, sharper, familiar in a way that made her blood thin. She turned, and a well-dressed man in a tailored black coat tipped his hat. "Miss Ivy Hart," he said, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "My condolences. I knew your mother." The world narrowed to a point. Ivy froze mid-step, the bundle slipping in her grip. Her mother's name hadn't been spoken aloud in years. Not kindly, not gently, not by anyone who wished Ivy well. Ruth used it only as a weapon. Silas used it to remind Ivy that blood doesn't buy you a thing. But this stranger spoke it like a key he'd been saving for the right door. I think you're mistaken," Ivy whispered. He smiled, a polite, practiced curve of the mouth that never reached his eyes. "I rarely am. Briggs Crowley." He extended a hand. Ivy didn't take it. "Your mother passed through my father's land many times. A bright woman. Sharp mind. Unfortunate circumstances." His gaze flicked over her face. "You look very much like her." Behind Ivy, a horse snorted. Caleb's gelding. She didn't have to look to know Caleb was approaching. She could feel the air shift, feel her lungs unclench just a fraction. Crowley ignored Caleb completely. "Funny thing about lineage," he said softly. "It has a way of tying knots that tighten long after the hands that made them are gone." His eyes sharpened. "Your mother left loose ends. You, Miss Hart, are one of them." Ivy swallowed, heat and cold warring beneath her skin. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but you do." Crowley stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to claim the space. Water rights, land boundaries, signatures that never reached the right people. Silas Halloway tried to keep things contained. But you walked out of his house with something that wasn't meant to walk. Ivy's breath caught. He knew. He knew. The small folded paper hidden in the lining of her old satchel, her mother's last scrap of handwriting, something Ivy barely understood, burned against her memory like a brand. Caleb's voice cut through the tension, low and steady. "That's close enough, Crowley." Crowley finally turned, giving Caleb a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Ah, the new husband. Congratulations. Though I do hope you understand the entanglements that come with this particular bride." Caleb moved without moving. Just a shift of weight, a narrowing of the eyes, but it was enough to make Jonah, 2 storefronts down, straighten like a guard dog. "Ivy," Caleb said quietly. "You don't have to talk to him." Crowley lifted a brow. "She seems capable of answering her own questions, especially the one about why everyone is suddenly so interested in her welfare." Ivy's voice cracked. Why are you interested?" Crowley studied her a moment, then said gently, "Because, my dear, some inherit money, some inherit land." His smile sharpened. "And some inherit leverage." Her knees weakened. Crowley tipped his hat again and stepped back into the street. "We'll speak again, Miss Hart. Soon. Secrets have a habit of surfacing, especially ones buried under the Halloway name." He left as quietly as he'd come, swallowed by the bustle of morning trade. Ivy couldn't breathe. The leather straps slipped from her fingers and hit the dirt. Caleb caught her elbow, not gripping, just steadying. "Ivy, look at me." She did, and the fear in her chest flared, raw and blinding. "He knew my mother, Caleb," she whispered. He knew things he shouldn't know. Caleb's jaw clenched, but his eyes stayed gentle. Crowley knows too much about everybody. That's how men like him stay powerful. But he was waiting for me. Caleb didn't deny it. His silence was answer enough. Ivy pressed a hand to her stomach, trying to keep the panic anchored. Why would he care who I am? I'm nobody. No, Caleb said, voice thick. You're not, and that's the problem. She shook her head. I need to know the truth, but I'm scared of what it means. Caleb stepped back, giving her space again. Always space. I'll tell you whatever I know, but we do it away from Crowley, away from town. You don't owe him a single breath. Ivy almost believed him. Almost. But Crowley's words still hung in the air like a rope waiting to tighten. Some inherit leverage. And Ivy Hart, for the first time in her life, wondered if people had been watching her not because she was worthless, but because she was worth something very dangerous. The ride back to the ranch was quiet in the way winter quiets a field. Soft on the outside, brittle underneath. Ivy held the reins of her borrowed mare with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Not from cold, from Crowley's words echoing in places she'd kept locked since childhood. Caleb rode beside her, silent but attentive, like a man who knew the wrong words might shatter something already cracked. When the cabin finally came into view, Ivy swung down before he could offer help. Her boots hit the ground harder than she meant, sending a jolt up her legs. Caleb dismounted slower, watching her with that steady patience of his. Ivy, he said softly, we should talk. She almost laughed. Sharp, too thin. Talk, yes. Seems like we've been needing to do that for a while. He didn't flinch, didn't defend himself, just nodded, as if bracing for a storm he believed he deserved. Inside, the fire was still warm from the morning. Ivy stood near it, rubbing her arms, not for heat, but for something to hold on to. Caleb stayed by the door, making the room feel bigger than it was. She didn't turn to face him when she spoke. You knew Crowley was after me. A beat. Yes. You knew he knew my mother. Another beat. Yes. And you married me anyway. She let the words fall heavy, like stones pulled from deep water. Caleb's voice came quiet but firm. I married you because you needed out, and because I needed help keeping the ranch. There it was. The truth she'd heard through the window now spoken to her face. Both, Ivy whispered. You married me for both. I did, he said. She finally turned and her eyes burned, not with tears, but with something raw. Do you know what that sounds like to someone who's only ever been useful when others wanted something from her? Caleb's breath caught just slightly. He stepped forward, then stopped himself. Ivy, I'm not them. But you needed me. She pressed a hand to her chest as if steadying something. I'm tired of being needed. I want to be wanted or not wanted at all. Caleb swallowed hard, and for the first time, uncertainty cracked through his calm. Ivy, I didn't use you. I tried to save you. That's the problem, she said, voice breaking. Everyone who ever tried to save me still owned me afterward. He closed his eyes at that, like her words landed straight in the place he feared most. I don't own you, he whispered. Then tell me why you didn't tell me the whole reason you wrote to that bride agency. He opened his mouth, then shut it. His silence was an answer Ivy wished she didn't understand. She stepped back, hitting the table behind her. I need to know every truth, Caleb. All of it. Not half of it. Not the parts you think I can handle. I've had enough of being handled. Caleb's shoulders sagged, not defeated, but honest in a way that scared her more than anger would have. You're right, he said. I was afraid if I told you everything, you'd bolt before you saw this place as more than a shelter. Her breath caught. Fear. He had been afraid, not calculating, not cold, just afraid of losing something he never thought he'd deserve. His voice dropped. I don't want you here because I need a signature. I want you here because the cabin hasn't felt alive since my family died. And you. His jaw tightened, as if the words weighed too much. You bring something back. She stared at him, heart caught between thawing and freezing all over again. Before Ivy could speak, hoofbeats thundered in the distance, too many to belong to a neighbor passing through. Caleb stiffened. His eyes narrowed toward the window. Jonah burst in without knocking, breath sharp from running. Boss, he said, you need to see this. Men riding in from the East Road. Caleb didn't ask who. He already knew. Jonah glanced at Ivy, worry etched across his face. It's the Halloways. Ivy's stomach dropped. The world tilted. Every bruise the past had ever left on her lit up like fire under her skin. Crowley wasn't bluffing. He had nudged the domino, and now it was falling. Caleb stepped toward her, not touching, just close enough for her to feel the anchor of his presence. Ivy, he said, voice low but steady. We face this together, but only if you choose to. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Choice. That word again. She didn't answer him. Not yet. Outside, the sound of approaching riders grew louder. Like a storm made of hooves and old ghosts, the riders came fast. Dust kicking, hooves pounding like a fist on a locked door. Ivy stood frozen by the table, breath shallow, as Caleb stepped out onto the porch, Jonah close behind him. She didn't have to see the riders to know who they were. Her body remembered before her mind did, shoulders curling in, hands fisting at her sides, the old instinct to make herself small enough to disappear. Ruth Halloway's voice cut through the cold air first. Oh, Ivy, Ivy, child, thank heavens we found you. The horse hadn't even stopped when Ruth slid down with surprising grace for a woman her age. Her skirt swished dramatically as she hurried forward, hands fluttering like a preacher's wife at a funeral. Ivy stepped back without thinking. Behind Ruth, Silas dismounted slower, not speaking, not smiling, just watching, the way a man watches an animal he believes still belongs to him. Ruth reached the porch steps and clasped her hands to her chest. You poor dear, she cried. We've been worried sick. Running off like that. Why, the whole town thought something dreadful had happened. Something dreadful had happened, Ivy thought. But she said nothing. Caleb moved subtly, placing himself between Ivy and Ruth, not aggressively, just enough to claim the space. She didn't run off, he said, voice low. She left. Ruth blinked at him like she'd just been slapped with a handkerchief. Left? Child, you must be so confused. Silas and I have done nothing but provide for you. Food, shelter, work suited to your temperament. Ivy flinched. Work suited to her temperament. That meant dawn chores that ended at midnight. That meant bruised ribs when she moved too slowly. That meant silence at the dinner table because girls with no blood have no right to speak. Caleb's jaw tightened. Whatever you did for her stops matterin' the moment you start using it against her. Silas finally spoke. His voice was smooth in the way of a snake's slide. That girl owes us, and we've got the papers to prove it. He pulled out a folded document. Ivy's stomach twisted at the sight. Ruth's flourishes along the edges, Silas's tight script at the bottom. A contract, one she'd never been allowed to read. "It's a debt for her keep," Silas said. 18 years of food and roof, signed by her late mother. Ivy felt the world blur at the edges. She remembered being 7, Ruth placing a pen in her mother's trembling hand. She remembered whispered arguments. She remembered tears, but she'd never known what had been written. Ruth gave a pitying sigh. "We didn't want it to come to this, truly. But since she left without permission—" "I didn't need permission," Ivy rasped, surprising herself with the sound. "I'm not property." Ruth's expression shifted, sweetness cracking, irritation bleeding through. "Gratitude would become you better than that tone, Ivy." Caleb stepped forward half a pace. "Her tone's better than yours." A shadow fell across the ground as Sheriff Ada Quinn rode up, dismounting with a swing that kicked dust around her boots. "Afternoon," Ada called, voice firm. "I hear there's a dispute." Silas straightened. "This is family business, Sheriff." Ada's eyes narrowed, not unkindly, but the way a hawk narrows its eyes when it spots a mouse pretending to be a rock. "Then it's my business twice. Let's see the paper." Ruth hesitated, then handed it over with an air of wounded dignity. Ada scanned it, jaw ticking. Then she looked up. "This contract ain't worth the ink on it. It names a minor at the time of signing and assigns labor in exchange for lodging. That's not guardianship. That's indenture. Illegal." Ruth gasped. "Sheriff Quinn, how dare you—" "Save it," Ada said sharply. "Ivy Hart is free to live where she chooses. If you push this, you'll be the ones facing charges." Silas's face darkened. Rage, cold and thick, rolled off him. "That girl stole from us." Ada raised a brow. "You got proof?" Silas's eyes flicked to Ivy, too quick, too knowing, but he said nothing. Ada stepped beside Caleb, forming a wall Ivy hadn't known she'd ever be allowed to stand behind. "All right then," Ada said. "Unless you got anything lawful to add, mount up and leave this property." Ruth's sweetness snapped entirely. "You'll regret this, Ivy. That man will tire of you, and when he does, don't come crawling back." Caleb's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "She won't need to." Ruth scowled, gathered her skirt, and stalked toward her horse. Silas lingered a second longer, staring at Ivy like she'd broken something of his. "You're not done with us," he murmured. "Not by a long shot." Then he rode off. The dust settled slowly. Ivy's knees almost buckled. Caleb turned to her, concern etched into the hard lines of his face. "You all right?" But she couldn't answer. Not with her voice. Not with her lungs. Because Ruth's last sentence wasn't what echoed in Ivy's chest. It was something much smaller. Much older. "You owe us. You'll always owe us." And for the first time, Ivy wondered if freedom would ever feel real, or if the past would always find her before she could outrun it. The house was too quiet after the Halloways left, too still. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Caleb and Jonah were outside walking the fence line with Ada, discussing patrol routes and what to expect if Silas tried anything again. Ivy stayed inside, not because anyone asked her to, but because her body had folded into a tremble she didn't want them to see. She moved through the cabin slowly, touching things just to keep her hands from shaking. A mug, a quilt edge, the back of a chair. Normal things. Things that didn't lie. When she reached the desk near the window, she meant only to set Caleb's forgotten ledger aside. But the movement nudged open a drawer that hadn't been fully closed. A sliver of paper stuck out, her name written in Caleb's handwriting. Something in her chest nudged her forward before her mind could argue. She eased the drawer open. Inside were notes, pages of them, folded maps, sketches. Not art, not handwriting practice. Routes, dates, distances, names. She lifted one page, and her vision blurred. Ivy Hart, possible direction of escape. Last seen near the South Ridge. Holloway House, history of domestic coercion and debt manipulation. Her breath hitched. She picked up another. If she moves at night, she'll take the low road. Safer from riders, but colder. Risk of hypothermia high. Her fingers trembled against the paper. He had tracked her. He had studied her. Not when she lived with the Halloways, but after she ran. These weren't rescue notes. They were pursuit notes. No, she corrected herself, stumbling back into the table. They weren't meant to catch her. They were meant to get to her before someone else did. But her body didn't understand the difference. Her body only remembered being hunted. Footsteps sounded outside the window. Caleb's shadow crossed the floor. Ivy froze, the papers crumpling slightly in her hand. He stepped inside and saw her immediately. Saw the open drawer, the notes in her grip, the look on her face. His expression changed. Not with fear, not with guilt, but with the kind of resignation that said he'd known this moment might come. "Ivy," he said gently. She held up the papers, voice breaking. "You wrote these?" "Yes." "You knew where I ran. You knew how I thought. You knew everything." His jaw flexed. "I knew enough to keep you alive." "By watching me?" she asked, the words trembling. "By studying me like I was a problem to solve?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Caleb?" Her eyes burned. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everyone always sees me as something to manage." Caleb took a slow step toward her, not closing in, just trying to reach across the distance that mattered more than the cabin floor. "Ivy, I wasn't planning you. I was planning safety. Yours. You tracked my steps. I tried to predict danger. You followed my trail. To beat the men who were after you." She shook her head violently. "It's the same thing to me." Caleb's breath shivered out. "I'm not them." "Then why does it feel the same?" She whispered it like a confession. "Why does my chest hurt the same way? Why does it feel like every kindness has strings, no matter who holds them?" Caleb looked pained, truly pained. "Because you've only ever known kindness that was a cage." "Then why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "If you had these notes, if you knew things, why didn't you give me the truth before the sheriff, before Crowley, before the Halloways? Why didn't you trust me with my own life?" Caleb swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want you to run from help." Her heart cracked. She set the papers down with shaking hands. "Then you never trusted me at all." "Ivy," she stepped back. "I can't breathe in here." He reached toward her, then stopped himself, hand tightening in midair. "Please don't walk away without hearing everything." "I can't hear anything right now," she whispered. "All I hear is the sound of doors closing." She brushed past him gently, too gently, like she feared even her own touch, and went to her room. She didn't slam the door. She didn't lock it. She just leaned her forehead against the wood and let the truth settle. She wasn't safe here. Not because Caleb meant her harm, but because she could no longer tell the difference between being sheltered and being held. And that was enough to break any fragile beginning. Outside her window, the last light faded, and the world slipped into a kind of darkness Ivy knew too well. The darkness that came right before a woman ran again. Freedom. Tonight it felt like proof of how wrong she'd been to trust anything that looked like safety. Her mother's ribbon lay in her palm, faded blue, fraying at the edges. The only thing she owned that had never lied to her. She curled her fingers around it and let her breath shake out slow. She didn't pack much. People who ran never did. A loaf of bread Jonah had left cooling on the sill. A blanket Mabel had insisted on gifting her. The small folded note her mother wrote long ago, still unread, still terrifying. She opened the door quietly. The hinges didn't creak. Caleb had oiled them earlier that week. The thought made her chest twist painfully. The cabin was dark. No lanterns, no voices, just the soft crackle of embers dying slow. She paused at the threshold, waiting for something, for a word, a sign, a reason to stay. None came. Outside, the cold air wrapped around her like a warning and a welcome all at once. She pulled her coat tight and walked toward the barn. Each step felt like stepping out of a story she had barely begun to believe in. Inside the barn, she moved by memory. The mare she'd ridden earlier that day lifted her head and snorted softly, as if sensing Ivy's trembling. "Hush," Ivy whispered. "It's just me." She saddled the mare clumsily, her hands shaking too much, her breath catching each time she listened for footsteps. She didn't want a confrontation, not with Caleb. Not when she knew how his voice could make her doubt her own decisions. When she led the horse out into the night, the moon had slipped behind a cloud, turning the world into a smear of silver and shadow. She mounted, holding the reins too tightly. Running, always running. Just as she nudged the mare forward, a soft voice sounded behind her. "Ivy." Jonah. He stood near the barn door, hair tousled, eyes heavy with worry he didn't bother to hide. "Where you going?" "I can't stay," Ivy whispered. "Did Caleb do something wrong?" "No." Her throat closed. He isn't the safe place I thought he was." Jonah rubbed the back of his neck, breath fogging in the cold. "You're shaking, Ivy. That ain't the kind of shaking a body gets from cold. That's the kind a body gets when it's running from ghosts." "I'm not running from ghosts," she said. "I'm running from things that are real." Jonah stepped closer, careful not to startle the mare. "Caleb will tear himself up when he sees you're gone." "I'm not his to keep," she whispered. Jonah swallowed hard. "Then at least let me wake him." "No." The word came out sharper than she meant. "If he stops me, I won't leave. And I have to leave, Jonah." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, slowly, painfully. "You come back if you figure out you want to," he murmured. "Doors don't close around here unless you shut them yourself." Ivy's eyes burned. "Thank you." She nudged the mare again. This time, Jonah didn't try to stop her. As she rode away, the ranch shrank behind her. The porch she'd swept with Jonah one morning. The corral where Caleb had taught her how to read a horse's breathing. The kitchen where she'd laughed for the first time in months. Her heart throbbed with each memory, each fragile brightness she was choosing to leave behind. The road ahead was narrow, marked by nothing but starlight and the whisper of wind through sagebrush. She kept her gaze forward, refusing to look back. If she did, she feared her resolve would crumble. She didn't know how long she'd ridden before she sensed it. A shift in the air, subtle but wrong. The mare's ears twitched. Her muscles tightened beneath Ivy's legs. Someone was behind her. Not close enough to see, not far enough to dismiss. Ivy's breath caught, cold and sharp. She pressed her heels lightly into the mare's sides, urging her to move faster, but not fast enough to panic. Not yet. Branches cracked in the distance. A shadow moved where shadows shouldn't. Her heart hammered. Crowley? Silas? Someone worse? She didn't know. She only knew one thing. Running alone was dangerous. Running back was impossible. Running forward was all she had left. And the dark road ahead had never looked so long. The road narrowed into a funnel of dark pines. Ivy kept glancing over her shoulder, pulse ticking like a loose nail in a wagon wheel. The shadow behind her moved again, closer this time. The mare snorted, ears pinned. "Easy," Ivy whispered, though she was speaking more to herself. Suddenly, branches snapped violently to her right. A rider burst from the tree line, cutting across her path. Another emerged on her left. Lantern lights swung wildly, catching flashes of iron and pale faces. Ivy's breath seized. Crowley's men. "Evenin', Miss Hart," one called. "Boss wants a word." Ivy yanked the reins, trying to turn the mare, but a third rider boxed her in from behind. The horses snorted and pawed, restless under the tension. "We ain't here to hurt you," the first man said. "Just need what you got." Her mother's note burned like a brand inside her coat. Ivy tightened her grip on the reins. "I don't have anything." "That's so?" He reached forward, fingers brushing the saddle horn. "Then you won't mind." A shot cracked through the night. The rider jerked back, cursing. His horse reared. Ivy ducked as another shot rang out. Clean, precise, warning. Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. That's far enough. Ivy's heart nearly collapsed at the sound. Caleb rode in hard from the ridge. Sheriff Ada beside him, both armed, both cold as the wind slicing down the valley. Jonah followed close behind. No gun in hand, but a pitchfork that looked meaner than steel in the dark. Crowley's men shifted, reassessing. Ada raised her rifle. "Unless any of you want jail time, ride on." The man who'd reached for Ivy spat into the dirt. "We just came for the girl. No need to make it loud." "You made it loud the moment you followed her across county lines," Ada barked. Caleb didn't look at the men. He looked at Ivy. Nothing else existed for him in that moment. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak. She couldn't. Crowley's men exchanged glances. The lead rider scowled. "Boss ain't gonna like this." "Boss doesn't have to like it," Ada said. "He just has to obey the law. Ride." After a tense moment, the three men pulled their horses away and disappeared back into the trees, lantern light bouncing like dying stars. The night settled, but Ivy didn't. Caleb dismounted first. He approached her slowly, hands open, voice soft as worn leather. "Ivy, are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No." But the word cracked like a brittle bone. "Ivy, you shouldn't have come," she whispered. Caleb stilled. "I wasn't about to let them take you." "That's the problem," she said, breath catching. "You always decide what I need before I can say it." Ada and Jonah exchanged a look but stayed back. "What did you hear?" Caleb asked, worry deepening. Ivy swallowed hard. "Enough. Enough to know I was never just a bride to you." Caleb's shoulders stiffened, just barely. "Ivy, let's talk somewhere safe." No. Her voice shook. Talk here. Wind rustled the pines. A cold quiet settled over them. Harkond. A long, heavy sound like a man lowering a truth he'd carried too far. I knew your name before you ever stepped off that coach. The world tilted beneath Ivy. I knew what Silas had done. I knew Crowley was circling for years. I knew if you stayed another winter in that house. He paused, throat working. You wouldn't survive it. Her breath stung. So you ordered a bride. I contacted the agency, Caleb corrected softly. I didn't ask for you specifically, but when your letter came, when I saw your handwriting shaking on the page, I knew. Knew what? Her voice cracked. Knew I was a lost cause, someone to rescue, someone to fix. I knew you needed out, he said, pain threaded thick in his voice. And I knew I had the means to get you out. Ivy felt the words like blows, clean, precise, mortal. So I'm just a rescue mission. Caleb stepped forward, then stopped, agony clear in the space between them. You're not a mission. You're someone He broke off, unable to finish. Someone you saved, Ivy whispered. Not someone you chose. Caleb's breath shuddered. Ivy, I chose you the moment I saw what they'd done. That's not choosing, she said, pulling back. That's pity. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Pity had always been louder than shouting. Ada stepped forward slightly. Ivy! But Ivy shook her head, eyes never leaving Caleb's. You tracked me. You planned for me. You waited for me. But you never trusted me with the truth of it. Caleb stood very still. I was trying to keep you alive. And I'm trying, Ivy whispered, to live. Her voice broke at the last word. She turned her mare away from him, not running, not fast, just enough to put distance between what hurt and what still called to her. Caleb didn't follow. Not because he didn't want to, but because he finally understood that wanting wasn't permission. And Ivy rode into the quiet, carrying a heartbreak heavier than any saddlebag. Ivy rode hard until her breath turned raw, and the mare's flanks steamed in the cold air. When she finally slowed, the world around her was nothing but dark hills and wind-cut silence. A place without voices, without questions, without Caleb, but not without fear. Fear had followed her for years, quiet, patient, familiar. It sat with her now, settling into her bones like winter. She slid off the mare, legs trembling, and walked a few paces into the brush. She clutched her mother's folded note in her hand, the paper soft from years of hiding. She hadn't read it. Couldn't. It felt like holding a truth that might break her open. She pressed it to her chest. Is this all I am? She whispered to the darkness. A secret? A problem? A reason for men to come hunting? The wind didn't answer. But silence, she'd learned, sometimes spoke louder than words. She knew running wouldn't end this. Not Crowley, not Silas, not the years of people telling her she owed them her life. If she left now, she'd be looking over her shoulder until her boots wore through. Running meant she'd live scared. Staying meant she'd have to be brave. And somewhere between the two choices, she realized something startling. She didn't want Crowley's voice to be the one writing the end of her story. She didn't want Silas's threats to echo louder than her own will. And she didn't want Caleb's truth to be the last thing she heard from him. Half finished, heavy with regret. For the first time in her life, Ivy wanted to turn around. Not because someone demanded it, not because she needed saving, but because she had something worth standing for. She mounted the mare again, breath steadying. Take me back, she murmured, and the mare obeyed. The ride back felt shorter. Or maybe Ivy had simply grown into her resolve. When the ranch lights appeared in the distance, lanterns glowed brighter than they should have. People were moving. Jonah at the gate, Ada near the porch, Caleb pacing like a man trying not to break his own ribs with worry. Jonah spotted her first. "Caleb!" he shouted. "She's back!" Caleb turned so sharply it hurt to look at him. Relief, pure and dangerous, flooded his face, then softened into something he held close, like he feared spooking her. Ivy dismounted before he could reach her. Ada approached, boots crunching on gravel. "Ivy," Ada said gently, "we were about to go after you." "I know," Ivy whispered. "But this—" She held out the folded note from her mother. "This is what Crowley wants." Ada's brows rose. "You sure you want to hand that over? Could be your inheritance. Could be leverage. Could be trouble." "I'm tired of my life being a secret," Ivy said. "If this is evidence, then let it be evidence in the open, not in the dark." Ada took the note slowly, reverently, like she understood the weight of Ivy's decision. "I'll keep it safe, and I'll use it to shut Crowley down." Ivy nodded. Her hands still shook, but not from fear, from choosing to stop running. Caleb stepped closer, cautiously, stopping a foot away. "Ivy, you came back." She met his eyes. "Not for you." He blinked, hurt flickering before he masked it. She continued softly. "For me. For my own freedom. For the people who've treated me like I matter. For the woman I want to become." A breath, steady now. "And because I won't let Crowley or the Halloways write my life." Something inside Caleb eased, like a rope being untied slowly, carefully. "I'm glad you're here," he said, voice low. "I'm not here because you saved me," Ivy added. "I'm here because I choose this place, and I choose who I stand with." Jonah grinned behind Caleb. "Sounds like she's standing with us, boss." Ada folded her arms. "Sounds like we finally got a fight with even sides." Ivy looked at Caleb then, not as a man who rescued her, not as a man who planned her escape, not as someone she owed anything to, but as someone she might trust one day, if he learned to trust her back. She stepped toward him, closing half the distance he'd left between them. "I'm here," she said, "but I'm not staying because I'm grateful." Her voice softened. "I'm staying because I want to." Caleb's breath broke quietly, not in relief this time, but in something far deeper. And Ivy, for the first time in her life, felt the solid ground of a choice that belonged fully, completely, undeniably to her. Morning rose over Amber Ridge with a soft, peach-colored light, gentler than the nights that came before it. Ivy stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching mist lift off the pasture. Her breath made small clouds in the air. She felt tired, but not the kind of tired that made her want to disappear. More like the tired that comes after making a hard choice and surviving it. Caleb stepped out quietly, as if asking permission to share the morning with her. He didn't come close, didn't touch the railing at her side. He simply stood a respectful distance away, hat in hand. "Ivy?" he began. Just her name, said in a voice low enough to carry apology without dressing it up. She turned slightly, waiting. He drew a long breath. "I owe you the whole truth, not parts of it, not the pieces that are easy to say." His fingers tightened around the brim of his hat. "I should have told you everything from the start. About Crowley, about your mother, about why I wrote to that agency." Ivy didn't answer. She'd learned sometimes silence helped a man say what he meant, not what he rehearsed. Caleb swallowed. I wasn't trying to own your choices. I was trying to buy you time to make new ones. But the way I went about it, I see now it felt like another kind of cage. A small ache tightened her throat. Yes, she said softly. It did. His eyes closed for half a heartbeat, not in pain, but in acceptance. I'm sorry, he murmured. Not the kind of sorry that asks forgiveness. The kind that admits I messed up something good before it had a chance to become real. Ivy looked down at her hands, at the faint lines where fear used to live. I don't want perfection, Caleb. I want honesty before protection. Every time. You'll have it. He said it like a vow, steady and unforced. She studied him, this man who'd done wrong for the right reasons, and still stood willing to face the consequences. She'd been owned, commanded, molded her whole life. But here stood someone learning to meet her in the space between fear and freedom. I have conditions, she said. Caleb almost smiled, but didn't. Name them. First, Ivy said, lifting her chin. We make decisions together. No more planning for me in the dark. Agreed. Second, I keep my room, with a lock, and you knock every single time? You have my word. And third, she hesitated, heat rising in her cheeks. If we stay married, if this becomes a real thing, it has to be because I choose you, not because paper says so, not because danger pushes us into it. Caleb's voice softened, breaking around the edges. I don't want a wife who stays out of fear. I want one who stays because her heart does. Ivy felt something quiet unfold inside her. Not sudden, not dramatic. More like a knot loosening after years of being pulled too tight. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the key he'd given her, the first night. The one she had once seen as a promise, then a lie, then a question. I'm keeping this, she said. Caleb nodded. It's yours. But she placed it on the porch rail between them. I'm not carrying it because I need protection. I'm carrying it because I have the right to come and go. And because staying... She exhaled, voice trembling but steady. Staying is something I want now, not something I owe. Caleb's gaze met hers, not claiming, not pleading, just holding. Then I'll be grateful for every day you choose to stay. A small smile tugged at Ivy's lips, unforced, unguarded. For once, no one was chasing her. No one was cornering her. No one was calling her useful or owed or broken. She was here because she wanted to be. And when Caleb reached out, slowly, carefully, she let her fingers brush his. Just once. Just enough. Not a promise. Not yet. Just the beginning of something real. A life no longer written on paper, but lived one chosen morning at a time. And so, as the dust settled over Amber Ridge and the lanterns dimmed one by one, Ivy Hart finally stepped into a life that was hers. Not borrowed, not taken, not written by anyone else's hand. Her journey was scarred with cold nights, hard miles, and the kind of hurt that doesn't fade quickly. But like many souls in the Old West, she learned that even the deepest wounds can soften when they are met with patience, honesty, and a place to rest. Caleb Vance didn't give her a perfect ending. He gave her a beginning, quiet, steady, and open to the choices she would make next. And maybe that's the real heart of every Western love story. Not the ride into the sunset, but the courage to stay when staying is harder than running. If this story touched you, even just a little, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Share your thoughts in the comments. your memories, your reflections, or simply your city name. And if you'd like to join us for more stories of hope, second chances, and the tender strength of the frontier, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and keeping the lantern lit for the next chapter. Thank you for being here. You are always welcome by this fire.